Episode 277, Death by Efficiency. This is the Change Underground. I'm your host, John Moore. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. I spoke with a friend the other week who has a master's degree in agriculture, and we were discussing the Bubugo process. He became obsessed with the nitrogen. Now this got me to thinking and reading. Nitrogen, artificial nitrogen, is the cornerstone element of the Green Revolution, the intensification of agriculture in the 1960s. Intensification is a strange thing. It basically means obtaining a greater yield from the same piece of land. Now that can be done in a number of ways. Farming something with a higher return per kilo than what's currently being grown, for instance, but this too has consequences. We are currently here in Australia in the middle of an avocado glut. Not 10 years ago there was a shortage. Price signals drove more and more producers to plant the millennial delight. Now farmers in Western Australia, see the link in the show notes, are dumping their produce rather than pack and ship because the market is flooded with local and imported fruits. Now then, for some reason, fresh fruit crops don't trigger the same reaction in the political classes as do cereal crops. The Green Revolution triggered the same results. Many smaller producers relative to the size of the market and an increase in supply to meet demand leads eventually to oversupply and price collapse. In the US, this led to subsidies through the Farm Bill. In Europe, given its cultural memories of famines during the 20th century's wars, this food was collected into butter mountains and wine lakes. The problem with subsidies is that they don't allow movement out of uneconomic enterprises and into more profitable ones. Okay, let me rephrase that. It's not that subsidies do not allow change, but they encourage producers to keep doing what they already do because of the income being guaranteed. There's little reason to change for economic reasons. When the subsidies end, things are very unpleasant. We lived through this in the early 1990s here in Australia when the wool price collapsed. There was a guaranteed floor under the market. Any wool not purchased by the market buyers was purchased by the Growers Corporation, backed by the federal government. Buyers stopped buying, wool stores overflowed, the Growers Company held out their hands for more federal funding until the feds finally said enough. The guaranteed price collapsed and it took 20 years or thereabouts to clear the stockpile, which perversely continued to keep prices down because of the supply it was creating. Once it was sold off, then prices started to move again in reaction to buyers. Now, some graziers stayed with wool and they were good at it, so they were always going to make a profit with it. Others focused on lamb and perhaps a small majority moved into beef. The national flock fell from 180 million in 1990 and it's now at 104 million. It went lower, but lamb prices are ridiculously high. La Nina has brought rain after basically the whole of this century being in drought, so graziers are restocking and people want to buy lamb, so the price goes up. This process from subsidies to free market has been an extremely painful one for many. Farmers left the sector, farms became larger and economies of scale efficiencies were promised. And yet the soil erosion has continued, artificial fertilisers continue to flood into waterways when they have water in them. For a good example, or perhaps a bad example of this efficiency leading to unwanted consequences, see episode 246, Growing in Subsoil, link in the show notes. The pattern continues. Efficiency, squeezing every last unit of output from a given piece of land, is a thing I think we should avoid. It is in essence extractive. Imagine, if you can, from a bird's eye view, the flow of food from paddocks through factories, greengrowers, supermarkets, farmers' markets, and whatever other means of exchange to individuals, and then through their respective local sewage systems. Now think of the energy used to move all that food and the energy embedded in the fertilisers, herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, and the diesel burnt, all sitting upon plants and their peculiar ability to photosynthesize. Now plants will do this for free. There are limits to this, but free energy, come on. The fossil fuels we're currently burning through are simply time-relocated products of photosynthesis. Given the amount of energy falling on the surface of the planet, we have opportunities to avoid this use of fossil fuels and its known consequences. COP26 notwithstanding, more on that next week. The technology is already available. Political will is missing in many places, but the tech is sufficiently developed to replace the old photosynthesis buried in the ground, and all without overly inconveniencing people. Now, there are times when people need to be inconvenienced. That's coming and has been here for decades. I feel uncomfortable describing the Black Summer fires of 2019-2020 as inconveniences, but you get the point. With the correct application of current technologies, the agriculture sector can be more diffusely spread through a more diffusely spread population. We can work in the developed world in many but not all sectors from anywhere. As this beds into society, food systems can adapt to a more localised affair. Instead of trucking produce to a central market in a capital city, then back out to the growing regional centres, local markets would provide better, and here I use the word in the correct sense, efficiencies and fresher food. A long-term dream of mine is to see every golf course repurposed into 2 to 5 acre small holdings. And yes, I have friends for whom this idea is tantamount to heresy, but, well, never mind. With smaller settlements spread across space and high-speed rail interconnections, we can achieve large areas of rewilding. Productive, complex ecosystem-based agriculture, nil emissions, and literally a chicken in every pot, so to speak. If we choose as a society to continue with the current recipe model of ag, chemical fertiliser plus pesticides, herbicides plus irrigation equals massive amounts of homogeneous output, we are doomed to recreate the salt marshes of Mesopotamia, the collapse of the Harappan cultures, and the US Dust Bowls of the 1930s. Food is the one key to quick wins on CO2 and methane. How our food is produced matters. We need to be the change underground and lead the way. Millions of households increasing their own food production will have a huge effect if we do it regeneratively. Remember Bill Mollison's suggestion, that just 10% of us need to move from consumption to production, and there'll be enough for all of us. And that us includes the biosphere. To steal a misquote from the Blues Brothers, our sorry asses are in this too. So keep growing as much of your own food as possible. Remember, this removes transport and production emissions from some of our food, and if you're doing it regeneratively, actually builds soil by decarbonising the air and recarbonising the soil. Now, if you're ready to make the leap into growing your own food, jump over to the website, worldorganicnews.com, look for the free ebook tab, or look in the hamburger if you're on mobile to get a free copy of the Change Underground No-Dig Gardening System book. And don't forget the Facebook group, Change Underground Podcast Group, where I see we've rocketed up to 12 members. Slowly is how exponential growth begins. Thank you all for listening. I'll be back next week.